welcome back to the American National Cattlewomen Podcast, Calling All Cattlewomen. I'm your host for today's episode, Nikki Nimlos, and I'm recording today's episode again from Laramie, Wyoming. We tried to record at Wyoming Stock Growers earlier this week, but we just did not have a chance. So we are back in Laramie shooting this episode, and today I am joined by Meredith Halweg, who is a Colorado native, but like many others has been recruited by the University of Wyoming. So she's here now. She grew up in the Denver suburbs, but yet now is one of the most involved people in the industry that I know. So she's an American National Cattlewomen member. She is on the Wyoming Board of Agriculture in the Southeast region. She is the VP of Wyoming Women in Ag. She's on the board for Feed 307. She's the president of the Graduate Student Council, ex-office member of the College of Agriculture, Life Sciences, and Natural Resources, and ASUW. And then she's also a Young Producers Council Region 2 Vice President. Oh my gosh, there's so many things. And then this year, she was just awarded to be one of the Cowgirl 30 Under 30. So that's very exciting. And she's also a huge advocate for the beef industry and Western culture on social media. And I'll link her social media in the description of this episode. So Meredith, welcome to the podcast and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Oh my gosh, thanks Nikki for the introduction. So hi everyone, my name is Meredith Halweg. I feel like Nikki kind of covered it, but I now reside in Laramie, Wyoming, and I'm married to my husband, Aaron Volkortson, and both of us are planning to have a cattle ranch here in the near future, but while we're in school, just kind of tackling that as it goes. And I'm currently in my master's program for agricultural and applied economics, and we're focusing on diversification on ranches across the state of Wyoming. So yeah, that's just a little bit more about me.
Yeah, and since you are a Colorado native, and we really haven't talked much about the past election results. I don't want to get too into it, but I wanted to briefly discuss the ballot initiatives in Colorado that were relevant to ag. And if you haven't followed them, if you're not from our region, they were Proposition 127, which was a ban which would have been a ban on mountain lion, bobcat, and lynx hunting. There was the Denver Ordinances 308 and 309, which were the fur and slaughterhouse bans. And all of those failed, which I was a little bit surprised by. But can you talk a little bit about how those failed ballot initiatives impacted agriculture in the state of Colorado and in Wyoming? Because oftentimes we don't have the same impacts that they're seeing in Colorado, but those kinds of things are coming to this state. So
right. I mean, I think we saw last year when we introduced wolves in Colorado, just kind of that negative impact across the state of Colorado and what that really did to wildlife alone. And then also what that did to the cattle industry and the constant cases of cattle either being eaten by wolves or them messing with new calves on the ground. So that was definitely a heartbreak last year in the ballots. But this year, I think it's great that none of those passed. I'll start out with 127. So I actually work with Safari Club International quite a bit, and that was one of the biggest propositions we were against, just because banning that type of hunting would really impact not only trappers around the state of Colorado, but it would also really impact those ranchers that are on that western slope that really get to see those lynx and those mountain lions on a day in, day out basis. And also looking at the houndsmen that would have been also negatively impacted. It's just really interesting because where it was placed after last year's elections with the wolves, and now this year trying to ban that, it was just really interesting to see the difference there. But a lot of the cattle producers are super excited that passed, or didn't pass, I guess, just because now their ranches are more protected, and they also are able to protect their livestock as well, so they can still hunt those animals and they can still protect their ground against it. The other ones was the fur trapping ban.
The fur and slaughterhouse bans in Denver.
Yes, the fur generally affected a lot of our cattle industry just because of all of the people that make hats for our great cattle producers. I didn't realize how involved those different hat makers were. So we have Cow Lot just right outside of Wheat Ridge, Colorado. And then we also have Greeley Hat Works, which gets a lot of their sources from our Colorado trappers. And that's whether it's beaver hats or rabbit and different things like that. But that would have been a huge impact to not only our western region, but also cattle and hat production nationwide. And then lastly, the slaughterhouse ban. That one's a fun one. I mean, we saw Proposition 15 come out in 2020 that would have basically stopped a lot of veterinarian practices across the state of Colorado, which thankfully failed at that time. I'm glad that the slaughterhouse ban failed this time too, but I don't see it, like, I see it coming back again. I'll be honest. It was really awesome to see that Denver voted against it, but also a lot of people in Denver are starting to realize actually where their food is coming from this time around, but I definitely could see it pop up again. So.
Yeah, so a big win, I think, in general for a lot of those agriculture-based initiatives. And really that kind of made me want to get into this episode and make it all about advocating for not only the beef industry, but the meat industry. And just because, this election, we had a few wins does not mean there's not going to be more initiatives in the future that are similar to this. So advocating for the industry has never been more important than today.
Correct. I fully agree.
Yeah. So I wanted to start this conversation with a theory called cognitive dissonance. So cognitive dissonance is basically when you hear something that goes against your own beliefs and you kind of refuse to believe it or even listen to it because you think that person may be lying or exaggerating or whatever it may be. And we see a lot of this in politics, of course, but especially with the people who think that beef and cattle are bad. And so when we think about advocating for this industry, I think we need to think about this theory and really think, who are the people we're trying to reach? And we've talked about this a lot, but mostly who we're trying to reach is people not in agriculture, because in ag, we know what we're doing and we know what we're doing well. But I also don't think we should be targeting the extremists, the people that are never going to change their mind. And so rather, I think we need to be targeting the large majority that's in the middle, the people who are busy, they don't have time to dwell over the ins and outs of where their food comes from, but in their conscious, they want to buy food that's good for their kids, that's good for the environment. They're thinking about the polar bears, that was produced in America, etc. So in your opinion, Meredith, what is the best way or some of the ways that we can better advocate for the industry to those kinds of people in the middle?
Right. I think you bring up a great point about the extremists. You are never going to get across to them if they don't at least have some sense of wanting to change or wanting to listen to the change. And I honestly, my favorite way to advocate is just going to the grocery store. I mean, every single time I run into somebody in the beef section or somebody in the meat section in general, and it's always lifting up a package, reading what is in it, which if you're a cattle producer, it's just beef. But they always will read it and then they'll say, and then I'll usually see them sit it back down. And that's kind of where I come into play, because I'm like, why would you ever sit down? This nice ribeye, got good marbling, probably prime. And I just walk up to them usually and I say, I was just curious, like, why you sat that back down. Do you mind if I answer a couple questions for you? Or I guess what is concerning you about this piece of meat? And it's always it's kind of like an interesting topic, just because people are like, oh, well, I don't know if beef is the best option. I don't know if bison is the best option. I don't know if pork is the best option. That's usually the kind of the common ground I get. But more recently I've gotten, well, is this grass-fed? Well, is this Angus? Well, is this? And it's always so interesting to walk up to them and just talk to them and engage with the conversation of, our beef is raised with the best practices known to mankind. It's seriously the best thing for our environment as well. And I don't know anything better than beef, honestly. Not only the taste, but the nutrients it gives you and the protein it gives you on a day in and day out basis. And that kind of is my starting ground. And then we will get into conversations. And one time I sat there, I want to say for 30 minutes, just engaging in a conversation. And, 30 minutes out of my day seriously could have made a difference for them. Whether that's them telling their neighbor, oh my gosh, I just tried beef at the grocery store because Meredith said that this and this. But that it's kind of a chain and ripple effect, because when you share something positive about an industry that someone's kind of teetering on, they'll go ahead and share that story. And they'll tell their friends, they'll tell their family, they'll say, you know what, honey, let's try this for dinner instead. And I think that's probably the best impact. And obviously we're seeing a lot with social media right now too, which I think is a great outlet as well. I will say, when you try to go a little outreach and stuff, if it's not on your For You page, you're not going to see it, and that's kind of the biggest struggle, I would say, with social media. So I try to relay as much information as I can on social media, knowing that I might dabble into that audience that I'm trying to hit, but I know it never will get all the way across,
Yeah. And so that's a good point. And that was going to be my next topic is social media. If we're advocating for the beef industry, it needs to be on social media. And you've been very active on social media, from sharing things about Western culture to Beef Fact Fridays. And we have to be advocating and telling our stories. Producers have to be telling their stories online, or no one is going to hear it. And we were both talking to a producer at Wyoming Stock Growers, who I hope he listens to this, because he'll know exactly who we're talking about him. But, he's a Wyoming producer. He homeschools his kids. And we were telling him, you are like 0.0005% of the population. Your story is so unique that people would love to hear it. And so to those who have maybe thought about social media or talking about agriculture on social media, what is your advice to getting them started? What platforms should they use, etc.?
Yes. That person we talked to at Stock Growers is so interesting, just because his biggest question was, how do I even get started, and how do I even start the content, And I will say that no content is stupid content. Many people think like, oh my gosh, who would want to see my daily life? Like, I'm folding laundry, I'm feeding the cows. But to someone that didn't grow up in a ranching setting, oh my gosh, that's everything to them. And seeing that interaction you have with your livestock, or seeing how your everyday life goes, being on a ranch or being on a farm, everyone wants to see that. I mean, when I was first getting my feet on the ground in agriculture, I seriously wanted to see who was in the field working, what kind of their tactics were, and how I could be just like them. And I think that's one of our biggest ways that we can flaunt our industry, in a sense, because even if it's just me putting out alfalfa cubes and having like the herd of cows behind me following me, or cake on the ground, I mean, people love seeing that. And people love seeing like how you actually interact as a person too. So being the true you on social media is so huge. But honestly, I've gotten so many questions on how do I even make content, but the content side of things, I feel like just kind of comes naturally. It's like, if you're in your day-to-day lives, if you're on your ranch, just take a video. I mean, people can watch about the average length right now is a 10-second reel of you just like feeding your cows, posted on your story, and people are interested. Or we've seen a lot of interest in the longer reels of like 2 minutes or 3 minutes even in length, of just education of your ranch or your farm. And honestly, I've seen a lot of that on social media and grow more. Or it's just a simple post of, here's where I grew up, here's what our ranch is doing now, here's some improvements we're looking to make in the new year. And Instagram is a great platform for that, whether that's sharing on stories, sharing posts, sharing reels, posting comment boxes, just so someone can ask a question to you, is a huge impact for those people that are just trying to connect or just trying to learn more. And that kind of feeds into Facebook now too, because you can just post on one application and immediately post to the next, or with that Meta version. And then I know there's a lot of things going on with TikTok right now. So I think there's a lot of information to be shared on TikTok, but I'm not sure what January holds quite
We're
yet.
not sure the
Or
future of TikTok right
yeah,
now.
so I would say TikTok's great as long as TikTok continues. But if it doesn't, then I think that we just really need to rely on that Instagram and that Facebook and possibly even X if we really wanted to dial in on the dialogue within agriculture. So
Yeah, so some of my most popular videos, and I'd be curious to hear yours, on TikTok are uh, products you didn't know come from cattle, in addition to meat, obviously. That had a ton of views. And misconceptions about feedlots. Or I have a video that did so well that was literally a cow just eating a tape measure that I had laid out. And the caption was, when cows see something, they immediately want to taste it. And people just love that. And I always think like the content I would love to see if I was in the middle of a city, in my apartment scrolling on social media, day in the life of a rancher, just showing the tasks you do that you might think are so mundane, but you have to remember that you're rare. What you're doing is rare. 2% of people in this country feed us. And so any kind of tasks like that, people love to see. You on horseback, you moving cows, or just videos of cows grazing, I think are great.
right. Yeah. One of my top performing videos, I guess, was just cattle walking on a rangeland. And I thought that was so interesting, but people didn't realize, I guess, coming from the east, how much we use our rangelands here in the west for cattle grazing, also BLM lands, and all of those grazing leases that we have here in the west. And another one was I think it was when I did rodeo queening. It was kind of funny. I was just waving on my horse, and people were like, oh my gosh, like you can actually be pretty and be into agriculture and into ranching too. Like, didn't really connect the dots, but they love seeing the interaction there with the animals too. Another one was meat processing. And I took a video over here at our university meat lab, and that one blew up just because people don't know necessarily where their meat is coming from. They don't know even what parts on the cow it's coming from. So just that educational piece. I love focusing on the education on my platforms, but even just those fun videos you can take, like the tape measure, so fun, but such an easy content to do with so many people interested in it. So
yeah, so if you're a producer interested in starting social media, download Instagram, download TikTok, take videos and watch a YouTube video on how to post videos. I mean, it took me a couple, honestly, a couple minutes to figure out how to use TikTok. Once I did, I realized that it's really not that difficult to use. And I think part of it is just getting past that first learning curve of how to actually use these platforms. But just start recording your life, the things you're comfortable sharing, and watch some YouTube videos on how to post them. And so what are the platforms you would recommend that would be the best for advocating for the industry?
I would definitely recommend Instagram, Facebook, and then I have been loving using LinkedIn to actually advocate, because not only you can post your informational content, but you can also post jobs. So if you're looking for maybe a ranch hand for your ranch, you can post that on LinkedIn too, but really hit both sides of the sector when you're kind of advocating for agriculture.
So in addition to social media, talking to people at grocery stores, what are some other ways that we can advocate for the industry?
I love to start at that local level. So whether that's getting involved here in Laramie, it's our Albany County Cattle Women, or across the state we have Cattle Women, Cowbells, stock growers. Stock growers is a huge one in our state right now. Whether that's Wyoming stock growers, I know that there's many different for different states across the U.S., but they educate so many people, and you're able to actually talk to other ranchers, talk to other producers, and it's really nice because it's open to the public too. So whether that's someone that just wants to learn, and you're able to actually educate them while you're there, and they're able to have a one-on-one conversation with you. Or I love getting involved with our Farm Bureau, and Farm Bureau is such a great organization to talk about the policy side of agriculture that you're maybe not familiar with, or you see let's say you see a bill on RFD TV and you're just curious, like, how do I learn more about this bill, or what does this even mean for me as a producer? Farm Bureau really covers that really well and helps you learn about it more and also advocate to the community. And here at the collegiate level, being involved with many clubs is really interesting. So I was the previous president of Wyoming Collegiate Cattle Association, where I made it a huge point that if you weren't born in agriculture, you still had a place in our club. And that really brought in such a wide range of students just because they felt comfortable. They felt like they could belong and they could learn from us. And I think it's just that level of making sure somebody doesn't feel less than when you're talking to them or helping them learn on a topic. Because I just think of myself when I'm learning something new and I feel brought down, or maybe someone's talking to me in a derogatory term. I don't want to learn more. Why should I learn more? And just talking and speaking in a more mind opening, or even in a positive setting, really helps educate people, and it really helps people want to learn more about our industry.
That's a good point. And when we think about advocating, it's how you talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
People remember maybe not even what you're saying, but how you presented yourself and how you interacted with them. And we were talking about this a few days ago, that my new method for when I'm talking beef, when I'm talking agriculture with people who aren't in this space, is to kill them with kindness. Mm-hmm. Present information, advocate for the industry in a way that's nice. And even if people have different views, that's okay. But, how do you feel when someone is attacking you, making you feel like you're stupid or whatever it may be? It's not a good feeling, and that's not the best way to get our message across. And so I know sometimes it can be hard, but speaking to people with a kill 'em with kindness kind of attitude can really go a long way.
I think just being direct, but not too direct in a sense, where you're still protecting your industry, but reaching that point of, this is kind of my wall. And I know that if I push past this, it's not going to be a good rest of the meeting with someone. And, it's hard to walk away from a conversation, but sometimes it needs to happen too, when you can't, like Nikki stated earlier, an extremist, because your point's never gonna get across no matter how hard you try, and just stepping away could be a better decision at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I kind of wanted to move on to the why we advocate. You're getting your master's in ag economics. You're clearly very involved and busy. So how do you find the time to advocate for the industry? Why do you continue advocating for the industry, and why is it important collectively for this community to continue advocating?
Oh gosh, so I guess I'll hit on the time. I am a weird micromanager, and I love time management. It's kind of one of my weird things. But being at my master's level, it really kind of opened me to a new set of people to interact with. And I love that. I'm such an extrovert when it comes to the industry, because I was just at a water conference through my master's, and I was talking to so many people about water rights here in the Western United States, and that's such a huge issue we run into, but it's mainly producers that we are seeing this issue at the local level. So talking to them and seeing, oh my gosh, how could we make a difference? What are some things that could change in your life, I guess, that would make it so much easier for your water rights? And that was such a fun topic because I was able to share it with more people too. And I don't know, I love advocating, and social media has gotten so easy with that because I can plan posts ahead of time. I could also share my stories at it takes 10 seconds to do that. And that's how I mainly get my advocating across. And I'm just so social. It's so bad. But I will talk to anybody. Like if you're standing in the corner, oh my gosh, I'll find something to talk to you about. And it's usually agricultural or beef cow related. So I'll do that. And then I will always continue to promote and advocate for the agricultural industry, because if it's not me, then who will stand up for you? Mm-hmm. In the industry, being 2% of the population, I wasn't born into agriculture, and I absolutely love the industry. I've loved how welcoming everyone is, and I love how truthful everyone is in the industry too. And that was something that really drew me in, because when someone's so welcoming to you, gosh, you just radiate energy and you just radiate positivity. And I just want to be that light for somebody else too. And I want to be that welcoming person when it comes to our industry. There's also so many things that needs to be shared about our industry that might not be perceived as good news on when you're watching your local news channel, or if you're looking on social media. It could always seem gloomy, but for you to comment something positive about the industry that you're involved in really just takes a different step back. So that's why I'll always continue advocating.
So why else is it important to advocate for the industry? Well, if you care about the environment, if you care about producing food for a growing population globally, if you care about the economy and you care about rural communities, then advocating for the industry is essential. If we care about keeping land and ag, advocating for the industry is essential. And there's people, not at their own fault, but because of modern day, that don't know where their food comes from. They don't have to think about it, which is such a luxury. It's a blessing in today's age, where we can go to a grocery store that's air conditioned, grab our food, and be gone in 20 minutes. And that's why it's important to advocate. We need to show the work and the effort and the good land stewardship that goes into that food. Well, Meredith, any last comments on advocating for the industry?
Yeah, Nikki. If you as a producer are not going to advocate for the industry, then who is? I really love to look at that because there's so many of our producers that are just quiet about our industry or aren't willing to speak up about it. And when it comes to making policies and passing those ballot box initiatives, you're the person that people are looking to. You're the person that's going to make the change. You're the one that has to share how great our industry is. Otherwise, we aren't going to be here anymore. And I think that's just such an important piece because our ballots now control most of our industry, whether that's whether that's property, land, and even our livestock. And we need to make sure that change happens and it happens quick.
Yeah. And kind of connecting back to the beginning of this episode, we're going to have these ballot initiatives that are going to be anti-ag. Mm-hmm. And we want to keep people educated on how harmful those can be. And so, sharing stories, putting research out there, putting pictures and videos to ranching is a good way to show the public what it really looks like and to garner more support from, this crowd that may not know where their food is coming from.
Mm-hmm. I think I'll just leave on a closing. I'll highlight our Logan County cattle women out of Colorado. Every single trade show I go to in Colorado, there's always a booth with someone from Logan County, usually one of the cattlewomen, that's selling beef, selling meat sticks, and educating the public. I mean, if that's not inspiring to you, go out to a trade show. Go introduce yourself to a crowd of people that you're not going to be around on a day-to-day basis and really try to change their minds and see what kind of conversation sparks up and see what maybe you could do differently on your ranch to advocate and really just talk to our general public because it's them that you're trying to hit as your audience.
Yeah, and make social media a family effort. Get the whole family involved. We were just talking about this older gentleman on TikTok, and his granddaughter is filming him do stuff on the ranch, and it's great. Mm-hmm. And people like them are lucky enough to be able to financially benefit from being on social media.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, we wanted to end by just kind of talking about NCBA's CattleCon. We are both ANCW members, and so we will be there. We hope to see lots of you there. There's a ton of cool events with ANCW planned. But what are you most excited for at NCBA?
I am so excited for NCBA because not only am I able to attend the tours for ANCW and learn more about the women in our industry, but I'm also able to go to CattleCon and go through the Cattlemen's College, which is such an important factor when it comes to educating yourself on the industry alone, and then also meeting so many industry producers. I'm so excited about that. And just being in San Antonio, oh my gosh, I don't know about you, but I have never been to San Antonio, and it's going to be such an amazing time.
I've never been to Texas, honestly. I'm a Wyoming, Colorado, Montana girl, and I have not left those borders much. So I'm excited to meet other producers from across the country because we have such different issues, depending on where we're at. We have a lot of the same, but, we're not blessed with some of the rain that y'all might get on the East Coast or, in the Midwest. So hopefully we will see you there and we can talk advocacy, we can talk agriculture and connect.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Meredith.
Thank you, Nikki.